folks, welcome back from your meal break. If you can hear me, go ahead and set your status to that green check mark so that I know that you're here. And while we're getting that done, did anybody think of any questions while you were on break? All right, I'm not seeing any questions out there. And I'm not hearing any questions. So, because it is after lunch, I am going to ask you to remove your green check mark and then give it back to me to let me know that you are in the train domain and that you are ready to proceed. Folks, I like to go ahead and do this after lunch every day because I know that for some of you, the Citrix session may time out over lunch, and I want to give you a chance to log back in. So once you're back in the train domain, go ahead and give me that agree. All right, I see most of those green check marks out there. Thank you very much. Again, I try to remember to do that every day, just in case your Citrix session times out. So go ahead and get rid of your green check marks now. Thank you. And what we're going to do now is the last activity in this entire workflow process, which is storage tracking. Before lunch, we placed an order as a time study not collected to be collected tomorrow. We went in, we found that order in collections inquiry. We generated a collection list, which is when our accession number was assigned. And then we went in, we marked that collection as missed, recollect. We then collected that specimen at the remote draw login location. We placed a stat bicarbonate level order, and then we used collections resolution to merge that uncollected order into the already collected container. And we could do that because they had matching collection requirements. After that, we went in to modify collections and we changed the collection method to no charge. Again, it doesn't really do much for our side, but it does let the charge services revenue cycle folks know what's going on. So once we use the transfer list to log that container into the in-lab location, at this point, if this were the GenLab class, we would go into accession result entry and we would result out the orders. However, this is specimen management, so we're just going to hand wave that. And we're going to put our specimen into storage. So at this point, what I want you to do is I want you to log into storagetracking.exe. Storagetracking.exe. Now, this is another one of those applications that is looking for a user preference. First time we have logged into this application, so we have no storage views are found for this user. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to click OK. We're going to maximize it out full screen. We're going to go to the upper left-hand corner and go to View Options. Let's go to View and Options. Select the Model Experience General Laboratory Storage, so MXGL storage. From the upper left-hand side, move that over to the upper right-hand side. And then click OK. So that is going to populate our storage locations window in here. And notice we can have multiple views open if we want to. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to open up the view We're going to find our storage unit, which in this case is refrigerator 1. We're going to open refrigerator 1 and notice that it has 6 shelves for the days of the week. So what we're going to do now is right-click on the Monday shelf. And normally what we would do at this point is we would select an empty rack. But what we are going to do for this activity is we're going to create a new rack. So in the normal course of events, probably not something that you want most of your end users to do, because this is actually adding reference data to our database. So for the rack, this is going to be your DL number, so your username, and then rack. So I'm DL16, so then the rack is DL16. We only have one active rack type, which is a 6x12 rack. So we're going to leave it with the only option available, and we're going to click OK. Now, folks, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we see here. In this rack, the rack type determines how the rack behaves. So how many rows, how many columns? Does it fill from left to right or from right to left? Does it fill from back to front or front to back? Does it fill by rows or does it fill by columns? So this has 6 rows, 12 columns. We're starting on the upper left-hand side. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to enter in that container with tomorrow's accession number. And remember that there's only one container on that accession. So it'd be your accession number. Usually we would put an A, B, C, or D at the end. There's only one container, so it's going to default in A4s. But it is doing a checkout here, and it's letting us know, hey, you've got orders in this container that are not complete. Are you sure you want to go ahead and put it into storage? And for this exercise, yes, we are. So we're going to say yes. And now notice the focus moves to the right. So now we know not only is it filling from left to right, it is also filling from back to front. And it is filling by rows instead of columns. So, does anybody have any questions up through step 8? All right. And use the red X at the upper right-hand side of the rack to close that rack. And then you should see your rack on the Monday shelf. So I'm going to pause here. Questions, comments? Okay. So then with your shelf open, with the Monday shelf open, what I want you to do is I want you to double click on your rack now. We're going to reopen it. And now for your container, let's go ahead and select that cell and right click on it. Notice what we can do. We can refresh. We can view the container information, which is going to branch us to container inquiry. We can find containers in storage, containers that are checked out, or containers by patient name. We can discard the container. We can check out the container. We can change the discard date of the remaining specimen volume, and we can even generate reports. We're going to check out the container. So right-click, check out container, and now notice that your rack disappears. And it disappears because we just removed the only container in that rack. So the empty indicator has been reset to empty. So now, if we right-click on the shelf and we go to select rack, and we filter by the racks that the names start with DL, you will be able to see your rack in here. Only the racks that are empty will qualify. Now, I want to go ahead and point something out here. We can rename racks. So what you could do, instead of allowing the users to create brand new racks all the time, which is going to keep adding values to that code set, they could simply rename a rack that is out there that has the appropriate rack type. So in this case, DL12 could use the rename rack to go ahead and add rack to the name. We've got a couple of racks out here for DL5, not concerned about that. But folks, let's go ahead and select the rack that you just created and click OK. And now, just to show you that you are not stuck with this, you're going to go ahead and move the focus over to the A2 cell. So if you want to, you can manually skip fields and then go back and fill them in later. That's perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and enter in your accession number for tomorrow with the container ID, A as in alpha. Press the enter key. Yes, you're sure we still want to store this container. And now it moves on over to the right. So, any questions through step 16? All right. Then select your container cell, right-click on it, and let's branch to Container Inquiry. Let's view the container information. And folks, this tool right here, technically it's an end-user application. This tool is great for troubleshooting because see what you can see in here. We can see everything that has happened and when it has happened on this container. We can see when it was dispatched. We see the missed event and the fact that the patient was unavailable. We can see that it was collected by the phlebotomist at the remote draw login location. It was received, though, by your user. We can see that the orders were added, the bicarb order was added by collections resolution. It was logged out and put in transit and then received at central processing. We went into modified collections. We updated the collection method, which generated another matching collection event to our previous one. We can then see where it was stored, down to the row and column in the rack. We can see that it was checked out, and we can see that it was checked back in. So remember, when someone says, hey, I've been logging this in and it's not in lab, is the location where they're receiving it going to match the in-lab location for the routed service resource? Because they can log it into all of the other places, but it's not going to be in lab until they log it into this location. So, does anybody have any questions on container inquiry? All right. So let's exit out of there. We're back in storage tracking, and now we're going to right-click on your container and discard the container. That resets the empty indicator on our rack to empty, and now we can close storage tracking. Now, before I close out of the application, does anybody have any questions? And folks, that is it for that activity, which means, of course, that there are some lesson review questions for you to answer on page 15. So go ahead and strike your green check marks, answer the questions on page 15, and then give me that green check mark back when you're done. see most of those green check marks out there. Thank you very much. So let's start going over the answers here. Now, you might have noticed that I made a particular point of going over the applications from which labels can be dispatched manually. So, folks, let's go ahead and start listing them. We can even begin with the ones that Krista gave us before lunch. Collections inquiry, modify collections. All right, Laura's saying label reprint, label preprint, collection list. Now I would say not department order entry, because again, the label printing logic during order placement is different than manually dispatching. All right, and specimen login, absolutely. So yep, label preprint, label reprint, specimen login, modify collections, collections inquiry, and I don't think I remember to mention you can also do it from collections resolution. If you're wanting to dispatch a label manually, these are the applications where that can be accomplished. Does anybody have any questions? All right, next up. What's the name of the application where you can merge a dispatched order into an already collected container? It's not modify collections. It's collections resolution. You got it. Collections resolution. Remember, that is a new-ish application. It's only been around since 2015. All right, now this is one that we didn't actually go through during the activity, but let's see if you can go ahead and figure it out. True or false? All orders will display in collections inquiry until they are resulted. True or false? All orders will display in collections inquiry until they are resulted. So I've got a couple of people saying true. However, if I click retrieve now, there are no orders found. And folks, the reason for this is once the orders have achieved an in-lab status, the collections part is done. Now, Lori is saying, hey, go ahead and check the filters. This is still our collection statuses. Here's all of our collection statuses. Got all of our specimen types, all of our collection priorities. So this is going to pull in anything that has a collection for 36 hours in the future, but only until it achieves an in-lab status. So the answer to this could have been done by simply clicking retrieve and going, oh, hey, they're missing. But you could also have taken a look at that last diagram that was in our introductory set of slides. Because the collections process, completely different part of the workflow from preparation and transport and storage. So this big gear right here, the orders will show as long as they're in any part of this workflow in the scheduling and collection. But once it's been received and it is in lab, collections doesn't show it anymore. So the answer to that question is false. We use collections inquiry to view orders for which the specimen has either not been collected or it's been collected, but it is not in lab. So I did not make a point of stressing this, but I want everybody to go ahead and make sure you have the correct answer in here. And Krista is saying that's exactly what you did to find the answer. Yeah, go in, check and see. Are they still there? Nope. Okay. All right, any questions on this? All right. So then, from a design standpoint, would you want the users in your lab to always create new racks and storage tracking rather than use the ones already in the system? Why or why not? Yeah, Jerry's saying no, more racks is more data to manage. Absolutely. And if we go ahead and bring that up, we don't want the end users to have to scroll through more rack names than can be assigned to actual racks in inventory. So that is functionality that we can simply revoke a task from the users, and then they don't have access to be able to create racks anymore. They can always rename a rack, but for the most part, we usually want to go ahead and revoke that ability to create new racks, unless you've got super users in the lab that are going to be, receiving new inventory, and you don't want them to have to go ahead and put in build tickets, in which case we could give just users in those positions, like super user positions, the ability to create new racks. But other than that, I can't think of a reason why we would want them to do that. Any questions here? Can you modify it while there are samples in it? No, because, or at least not in the end user application, because that rename option only comes back in when you're selecting an empty rack. Does that answer your question? Excellent. All right, folks, any questions over any part of this first chapter? All right. So then we're going to move on to the next chapter where we're going to be talking about code sets. And I'm going to ask you to please read page 16 and give me that green check mark when you're done. looks like I've got most of those green check marks out there. Thank you very much. So let's head on over to the slides now. We're starting in now on slide 11. Slide 11. So folks, there's prerequisite build that needs to be done before we can go in and build out like collection requirements and things like that. And the first part is around the accession numbers. So, is your site going to use alpha prefixes? What about site prefixes? Then we've got cancel reasons, collection method, reasons missed. We saw that in that drop-down box. Special handling instructions and lab handling instructions. Specimen types and transfer lists. So a lot of this can be done in core code builder. So if we're looking at this first code set 2057, this is the accession format code set for the alpha prefixes. So this is where we're going to build like QC, so like GenLabs QC, QP, that pre-active quality control. But folks, I want to go ahead and just have you take a good look at this screenshot here. This is a shared code set. What other solution utilizes this code set? Radiology and cardiology, absolutely. So folks, because this is a shared code set, that means any modifications to this code set really should be signed off on by both sets of stakeholders, both laboratory and radiology. And I will also go ahead and point out that alpha prefixed accession numbers should also not have the same prefixes as other types of barcodes, like printer barcodes and patient wristbands, because the computer, if there is the exact same alpha prefix or a different type of barcode, then how does the scanner know what it's scanning? What it's scanning. So you really want to make sure that you are looking at all the possible interactions when you're building it. So these are the alpha prefixes. Now, I will go ahead and point out here that we really recommend that only anatomic pathology utilize alpha prefixes over here in the lab space, and everyone else use our Julian format of accession numbers. We'll go into why a little bit more later on. So this is just the code set, the alpha prefixed code set. It has to be built before we can start creating our accession classes. Now, along with the accessions, does your site use site prefixes? If so, we build those on code set 2062, and then we assign the site prefix to our facilities. The site prefix can be anywhere from 1 to 5 digits. And we'll go over where to set that a little bit later on. Now, the cancel reasons, this is another shared code set, folks. It is shared by both laboratory and radiology. So again, changes made to this code set really should be signed off on by both sets of stakeholders. Now, the collection method, that is purely lab, and the collection method is pretty much entirely client defined. You can enter whatever values you want in here. None of them have CDF names. So the system is not hard-coded to look for anything. So you can have whatever you need to have in the system to be able to properly document how that specimen gets collected. Now, this can be built in Core Code Builder, or When you are in Bedrock and you are creating your collection requirements, if you don't have the value that you need in that collection method drop-down box, you can actually add collection parameters on the fly in Bedrock. Now, as we go through this list, I will give my recommendations on the ones that are totally okay to go ahead and build in Bedrock, the ones that you can, but there's going to be some other settings that need to be done, and the ones that I really don't recommend. The collection method, sure, go ahead and add it in Bedrock. All you're doing is adding a value to the code set. Now, reasons missed. Okay, this is our code set 2059. And you'll notice we've got a couple in here with CDF names. But again, the rest of those are client defined. You can have whatever you need to. So I'm going to pause at this point. Any questions on any of these code sets so far? All right. Now we're going to get into a couple that you may or may not be using. So the first one here is code set 230, which is special handling instructions. So this is a completely client-defined code set. You can have whatever you want to. It really does need to be relatively short, okay, because we don't have a lot of room on the specimen labels. So, 15 characters or less, 10 characters or less, something like that. Keep it short. Now, special handling instructions display not only on the specimen labels, but they can also display to the end user in PowerChart Specimen Collection. And you can build in code set 230 in Core Code Builder, or you could build those in Bedrock absolutely just fine. So special handling, this has been around for a while. Again, it's got a really low code set number, 230. Lab handling instructions, on the other hand, are a relatively new code set. So you might remember in fundamentals, they probably mentioned that we reserve the first 100,000 code sets as Cerner-defined code sets, which is absolutely correct. But we also reserve the 4 millions as also Cerner-defined code sets. And lab handling instructions is one of those. Now, lab handling instructions can display in specimen login. If you really want them to, they can be printed on customized labels. You can take our standard label program and customize it to have lab handling instructions print on there as well. There is a catch with lab handling instructions here. One, they must be added in Core Code Builder. You don't have an option to add them in Bedrock. But two, once they have been added to the collection requirements for an order, Bedrock can no longer be used to maintain those collection requirements. Because if you add it to the collection requirements in Pull Recommend, and then you go into Bedrock at some later point, and you make any change to the collection requirements in there, then it will actually remove the association to the lab handling instructions. So there's catch number one. Catch number two, special handling instructions are taken into account when we net orders into the same container. So special handling instructions are taken into account for container netting. Lab handling instructions are not. So orders with different lab handling instructions can still net to the same container. And the third gotcha, if you decide you really do want to go ahead and customize those labels, the customized label programs cannot be supported by Oracle Health Server because we don't have your code installed in our in-house domains to be able to take it apart and put it back together again. So if you run into an issue with your customized label programs, what we're going to ask is the issue reproducible with your standard label program? If the answer is no, then our recommendation is going to be to go back to the standard label program, and in the meantime, have whoever your in-house CCL person or team is go ahead and troubleshoot your customized label program. So lab handling instructions have 3 sets of gotchas. That is something that you really want to be aware of. Questions on that? All right. Now, specimen types. They're code set 2052. However, I really recommend that they not be built in Core Code Builder. I recommend that they actually be built in the sources tool in McDB Tools. And I know you're wondering why. Why should micro be the gatekeeper for any new specimen types? Well, the folks that I had in class last week can totally answer that question, but I'm not going to pick on them. Instead, for the rest of you, micro has some additional build that needs to be done for these specimen types. Because yeah, we build them as sources, but then micro actually assembles a source hierarchy where micro has entire categories and then sections and then individual sources, because micro has a lot of build that can flex at different levels of the source hierarchy. So if you go in and add like arterial in there, but you don't add arterial to the bloods source section, then any of the build that flexes based on that, so for like a blood culture, won't be applied to that new arterial specimen type, which is why I'm picking on it, because you can see out here, no CDF meeting. So this is a case where you can add specimen types in code set 2052 and they'll work just fine for GenLab. They'll work just fine for blood bank. They'll work okay for Helix. But future micro build that may depend on that new specimen type won't work unless micro actually does their stuff too. So I recommend that we go ahead and have micro be the gatekeeper of any new specimen types in that code set. So does anybody have any questions on that? All right. Now, some of you might be looking at this screenshot and going, hold up here. What's with this very generic AP specimen type? Well, AP doesn't use code set 2052 for their specimens. I believe they use code set 1306. But remember what I was talking about this morning in our workflow activity, that in addition to the ordering provider, order communication type, and order date and time, that the lab share portion of the order server required 4 additional fields: specimen type, collection priority, reporting priority, and the collection date and time. The specimen type that it's looking for must be on code set 2052. So in order for anatomic pathology to put in a search path request, what they do is they have the specimen type of AP specimen just defaulted on the order entry format, and then they have a different field that says, oh yeah, this is a lower left lung biopsy with margins, or something like that. And then over an APS maintained case, the AP folks go ahead and get everything hooked up that needs to be hooked up to that anatomic pathology order. But it has to have a value from code set 2052 in order to make it to the lab show. Now, That's going to seem reasonable compared to this next one. There's also a radiology specimen. And I know some of you are tilting your head to one side at this point, like Miss Mina does to me when she goes, I have no idea why you're saying that. But radiology does as well. Radiology has got a radiology specimen type out here. And my theory is that because Cerner started out as a laboratory information system company, and then the very first solution that was added was radiology. Radiology actually borrowed a lot of our code. And in this case, a radiology order has to have a specimen type in order to make it through the rad share portion of the order server. Now, why am I talking about that in the laboratory class? In order to be able to say this, please do not inactivate the generic specimen types for radiology or anatomic pathology, or you will break those solutions. Please don't do that. Now, specimen types, again, really should be added in the sources tool in MICDB tools. The source hierarchy needs to be updated. And while you can build them in CodeZet 2052, technically you can build them in Bedrock. I really don't recommend it because of the additional microbiology build that really needs to be done. Questions or comments here? All right. Now I do want to point out in the notes under slide 23, it will tell you why this add option is dithered. And it's dithered because we have back here on the middle screen only include specimen types already associated. We want to be able to add a new specimen type. We have to uncheck that box. All right. And then we've got CodeSet 1663, which is for storage temperature level for blood bank, because here's your negative 30 degrees, here's your 2 to 6 degrees, but specimen management uses it as well for our transfer temperatures. We can actually create transfer temperature specific transfer lists. And Stephen, I see that you're saying this is an eye-opener. Oh yeah. There are so many interconnected moving parts and pieces to specimen management that it's just going to blow your mind. Or at least it did me when I was first learning. So folks, let's go ahead and think about why we might want to create separate frozen versus room temperature transfer lists. Anybody in here ever run errands on a nice hot summer day where it's like 99 degrees outside and you decide that it would be awesome to go ahead and have some ice cream and maybe you needed some cereal, so you stop by the grocery store and you get those? What happens if you put the ice cream and the cereal into your trunk? And you're running around and you're running errands and you may not be home for an hour. Yeah, in the case of a lab, you've got specimen integrity issues. Because if the frozen specimen doesn't remain frozen, that's going to be a problem. If the room temperature specimen gets too cold, that might cause a problem. So if you want to have different separate transfer containers, maybe one's got dry ice, one's got wet ice, and one is just a box, then you need to be able to create different transfer lists based on the transfer specimen. In the case of our running to the grocery store, we're going to have ice cream soup by the time we get home. And if it's bad enough, we may even have soaked in the cereal box. So this is why you might, if you know you're going to be out running errands, you might have a box in your trunk for the dry goods, and you might have a cooler in your trunk for the ice cream and anything else that needs to be kept cold. So we can do the same thing with transfer specimens. All right. Any questions here? Okay. So folks, at this point on slide 25, every one of us has been assigned an orderable. The orderable I'm going to be working with, because I am DL16 this week, my orderable is the vitamin D25. So folks, at this point, I want you to write down the orderable that you have been assigned on this slide. Again, it's per DL number. All of these orderables currently work. All of these orderables have currently fully built out collection requirements. What we're going to do for the in-class activities, we're going to change various parts of the collection requirements, and then we're going to make sure that they still work. So make sure you write down your assigned order. And then we're going to go out to the domain. We're going to start making some changes. So let's get to page 17 in your participant guide, page 17. Here's what we're going to do. In Bedrock, we're going to build a special handling instruction. And then we're going to add it onto your collection requirements. Then we're going to go to Core Code Builder. We're going to add a lab handling instruction. And then we're going to have to use CoRecMate to add that lab handling instruction onto our collection requirements. So let's begin. So if you're still in any applications, you can go ahead and exit out of those. We're not going to be back in any of these end user applications for a while. So first place we're going to go is actually Bedrock, which I want you to launch from the shortcut on the desktop. I want everyone to go ahead and launch the Bedrock from the shortcut on the desktop. And yes, folks, this does take a little while because Bedrock is loading a whole bunch of information. Now, once you are in Bedrock, we're going to be working on the Design, Build, and Maintenance tab. And you may have noticed that all of our orders are GenLab orders. So on the left-hand side under Solutions, go ahead and select PathNet General Laboratory. And then our set of wizards will populate here in the middle portion of the screen. And we're going to single click on the collections wizard. In here, we've got three options. Define collection classes, associate benches and instruments to collection classes, and define collection requirements. Now, folks, we will get into why I do not recommend defining collection classes here in Bedrock. Let's just say that there are a lot of parameters that you still have to enter in the old school tool. Now, associating benches and instruments to collection classes, that actually is a good thing because then that defaults in the collection class when you're building out your collection requirements. But for right now, for this activity, we're going to select Define Collection Requirements and click Begin. Now, when you are selecting the facilities, you are selecting the institutions where the routed service resources are located. So if you only have a few like we do, just move them all over over to the right. If you've got a whole bunch, DHA, I'm looking at you, then you need to make sure that you have some sort of checklist, some sort of standard operating procedure to take the first batch, move them over to the right, build their collection requirements, come back, take the second batch, move them over to the right, build their collection requirements, wash, rinse, repeat until you make it through all of your facilities. The last thing you want to have happen is that you miss one of the facilities because you forgot to move it over. So very important. So I'm just gonna move them all over. Go to the lower right-hand side and click next. And now we are at the Define Collection Requirements screen. Now again, I don't know if you noticed, but not only are all of our orders Gen Lab orders, they're actually all chemistry orders, assuming that I selected them all correctly. So for the sub-activity type drop-down box, I want you to select chemistry, and then with all orderable items selected, open up that drop-down box and find your assigned orderable. So my assigned orderable is vitamin D25. So you will find your assigned orderable. And let's see what we see here on the screen. Once you find your assigned orderable, we can see the specimen type. So in this case, we've got blood. The accession class is blood. So our Sterner recommended best practice is that orders with similar specimen types connect together. Orders with completely different specimen types should not. Now, Sherry, I see your hand is raised. What is your question or comment?
Sorry, are we supposed to all have different orderables in? I must have missed that. You had a sheet up there, but I didn't see 12 on there. So should I have a DL? Oh, over there. I'm sorry. I missed that. I'm just going to take a screenshot if you just give me a sec.
No, that's okay. This is also on slide 25 in your PowerPoint PDF.
Okay.
So if you have that open, you can just highlight it.
I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Yep, no problem at all. Usually I am somewhere in the methemoglobin. Boy, am I glad I don't have to try and pronounce that this week, or oxycodone. Usually I'm not all the way down at vitamin B25, but hey, there's a reason why we go ahead and we create extra values just in case. So yeah, each of us are going to have our assigned orderable. Each of us are going to select our assigned orderable here. And assuming I selected correctly, under the collection requirements, all of our orders should be routing to the chemistry manual bench. Now, our orders may have different containers, that's fine. But all of our orders should be routing to the chemistry manual bench. Now, we want to add special handling instructions. So, in the normal course of events, we come over here to the special handling instruction. We would open up that drop-down box, and we would go, oh my goodness gracious, the value that I need is not there. Now, I will say, if you are using the value or the identifier of CM for your build this week, I'm not sure that your special handling really needs to be CM aliquot. So you may want to go ahead and update that display, because that to me looks a little odd. So just a heads up. Speaking of which, okay, once we determine that the special handling instruction we want isn't in there, we're going to go to the lower left-hand side. Jerry, okay, yours I messed up on. All right, well, Jerry, let's see. Who are you? Your DL6 and DL6. The glucose fasting is routing to the analyzers. Okay, that's actually a little odd. Glucose fasting. Oh, yep, you're right. Okay, they must have updated that on me. Thank you very much, Jerry, for letting me know that the glucose fasting is routed there. I will go ahead and have to redesign this. You know what, Jerry, how about this? How about you work with blue coats? Dial Y-S-A-T-E. Okay. So Jerry, how about you go ahead and work with this one? And I'm going to go ahead and make a note that I need to update glucose fasting to glucose. Not even going to try to pronounce that word. Can anyone tell me how to pronounce that word? Dialysate?
Dialysate, yeah.
It is dialysate. Okay, thank you. Liberal arts major, folks. There's a lot of words that I recognize, but don't ask me to pronounce them. Okay. Technically not a troubleshooting opportunity. It just means that the model experience domain that my train domain is copied from, it just means that they must have changed something over on their side. So, Jerry, go ahead and work with this one this week. That way you've got the chemistry manual bench on there. And I'm going to update my specimen management PDFs to go ahead and include that. Okay. So back to my vitamin D20. There we go. All right. So now we should all be working with orders that route to the chemistry manual bench. We're going to go to the lower left-hand side. We're going to click on Add Collection Parameters, and we are going to select Special Handling. Now, when you're adding this in, you're going to want to put an identifier on here. And folks, this can be your DL number username. This can just be your number. This can be your initials, whatever you want to do, but just make sure that you identify your build consistently. So all of the build that you do in class should have the same identifier on it. Okay? If you decide that you want to run through all of the build again, maybe with a different orderable on your own, after class, one, feel free to do so. This environment is yours till 4:30 on Thursday. But two, if you do that, any of the build that you do outside of class should have a different identifier on it, so that we can easily tell what you did in class versus what you did out of class. All right, so for me, I am deciding, I'm just going to use my number. I'm just going to go ahead and use 16, and then put a special handling instruction in here. Now, I am going to say, enjoy the weather. Oh, hey, look. Bedrock suggests the special handling display should be no longer than 15 characters. Again, folks, that is because we have a limited amount of real estate on the specimen label. So I need to have less than 15 characters on it, which means I've got this many to work with. There we go. All right, and folks, you can put the special handling instructions that I have in the participant guide. That's fine. You can have fun with it too. Folks, this is class, all right? As long as you have something in there, I'm happy. You want to have fun with it, there's nothing to say that class can't be fun. So for my special handling instructions, I'm telling them to dance a jig. And then for the description can just be the same thing if you want it to be, or you can add on. To your description. You don't have the same character limit on the description as you do on the display. So enter in a special handling instruction less than 15 characters, less than or equal to 15 characters. Get a description in there. Make sure you have your identifier that you're using for your build this week. And then once you have that in there, click Save. Now, the advantage of adding them on the fly here in Bedrock is don't have to cycle servers, don't have to close and reopen the application. I can open that drop-down box and bam, there is my special handling instruction right there in the list. So anybody who's ever had to go ahead and do build where you've had to refresh a code set in the back end, or you've had to wait for the code set to refresh manually, like wait 10 minutes for it to refresh, being able to select it right away is amazing. So folks, I want you to do that on your chemistry manual bench and on the all bench row, all bench or instrument row. And folks, the reason why we have this all row down here, it is a safety net row. This is the set of collection requirements that will be applied if we don't find a matching row up top based on the service resource age collection priority combination. So does anybody have any questions in here before I click save? All right, so click save, and then we're done in the collection requirements for now. So go to your lower right hand corner and click finish, and finish. Go ahead and get back to the main screen. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to core code builder. Now the advantage starting out here in Bedrock is this lower center portion of the screen, because these are the Starter Millennium applications, and we can filter them, show applications for only the selected solution, and then it will show us the applications like core code builder, and then a single click is all you need to load that application. So it functions like an app bar. And Krista, I agree. I love this feature in Bedrock too. But it's even better than the app bar, folks, because the app bar caches data. And that's why we don't use the app bar in our building and maintaining classes, because we'd have to keep closing and reopening the app bar for it to go ahead and pick up the new build. The application links in Bedrock don't cache data. So if you're building out lab, I mean, even a Gen Lab order, you could be going into half a dozen different applications. Being able to launch those applications from Bedrock is a really big time saver. So if you don't see that list of applications at your site in Bedrock, there is separate Bedrock Wizard security involved in that. So you'll need to ask whoever's managing your Bedrock, hey, can I get this? Because it is really nice to have. And Krista agrees with me. Okay, so out here in Core Code Builder, we are going to enter that code set 43037. We are going to select data to load is all, and we're going to click search, and we can see if it's working ahead. Now folks, this is great if we know the code set. But what if we don't know the code set? What if you don't have your code set slides from this class handy when you're ready to go ahead and do some build out? You know what? As long as you know a value in that code set, the advanced search out here comes in really handy. Because I can click on the advanced search and I can say, you know what? I want to search for code value displays that start with this set of characters. And then when I click search, it'll go, oh yeah, that one's in the special handling instructions, and there is the particular value. So as long as you know a value in that code set, you can use the advanced search to quickly find the code set, select data to load as all, and then just click that load all button, and it'll load it here in Core Code Builder. Because while I would love to say that I have all the laboratory code sets memorized, yeah, my nose would be longer than Pinocchio's if I tried. So make sure that you're utilizing all the tools available, including our advanced search effort. So folks, hopefully by now, everyone is in our lab handling instructions. And so we're gonna go to the lower left-hand side, and we're gonna click on the Add button on the Code Value Management tab. And now we're gonna put in some lab handling instructions. These do not have the same character limit that special handling instructions do. So put in your identifier, whatever it is this week, and then put in whatever the display is for your lab handling instruction. My lab handling instruction is going to be, see, I'm already telling you to dance and jig. Maybe I am going to say, hold up to press tab to go ahead and tab out of that display field. Again, we're not going to put in a CDF meeting because this code set is completely fine. What we are going to do is go to the lower right-hand corner and click OK. And then you should see your new lab handling instruction here on the screen. Now, folks, once you have built your lab handling instruction, please go ahead and give me that green check mark, because what I'm going to do before we go any further is I am going to refresh that code set in the back end using CRM test 6024 and the code set number 43037. So while I'm waiting on your green check marks, let's go ahead and discuss this whole CRM test business. I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to put my note on the screen. So folks, why would I need to manually refresh a code set? Because we do not cycle server 49. We do not cycle server 49 in production, because that can actually break some of the other applications. So that's the code cache manager, I believe. So instead, what we do is we either wait the 10 minutes for the code set to refresh, or we log into the backend and we run this command, CRM test, and then 6024 is the number for the command for refreshing a particular code set. And then we put in the code set number. Now, if you go to the when to cycle servers reference page, the only place server 49, which is our code cache server, the only place that's mentioned is right up at the top. Nowhere else on that page of the when to cycle servers is it mentioned. What you will see on that page is you will see several mentions of the CRM test. So if I do a control find and I look for 49, yeah, the code cache refresh server was added in a particular package, and that's the one that we never, ever cycle, okay? So there's only 3 instances of 49 in here, and the other 2 aren't even this server. Now, what you will have are CRM test 6024 and then a code set number. This is a back-end refresh. Now, folks, most of the time, you can wait the 10 minutes and let the code cache refresh server go ahead and refresh. In our case, we are wanting to go ahead and get a jump on this. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we don't have to wait that 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my screen one more time. Okay, I had people that gave me green check marks and they took them away, but with 13 values out here, I think we've got everybody's building. So now I'm going to refresh the code set. Now, in order to do this, it is going to check your front end security. and it's going to check to see, does your user have the security to be able to refresh that code set? So in this case, I've just refreshed the code set. Now we can go into colrecmate.exe, colrecmate.exe. Go ahead and sign in with your DL number, username, and server password. You can go ahead and take down your check marks now. Thank you very much. And now in this drop-down box in here, we cannot scroll to find our orders because it only gets down to a Spcimen. So what we need to do is start typing. So type in the first few letters of your orderable so that you can get to the right area of the list and select your order. And ideally, you will see your special handling instruction here on the screen. Now, if you don't, we will have multiple chances to go ahead and add it back in. You could add it in here now, or you could add it in the next time we go back into bedroom. Either way, I'm not too concerned about it. What we're in here to do is we're in here to click on the lab handling instruction for the all row and the chemistry manual row. So click on the ellipsis button under lab handling, open up that drop-down box. Now, if I had not refreshed the code set, we probably wouldn't see these values in here. This is part of the reason why I refreshed that code set before coming into colrecmate. Now, if you don't have those values in there, close colrecmate, wait a little bit, and then go back in. And actually don't worry about it too much for this activity because we're going to have to re-add them later on. So find your lab handling instruction. Notice you can have multiple lab handling instructions. You're not limited to just one. Once you find your lab handling instruction, click save in that little window. And notice that when we do that, we get a little icon that says, hey, we've got lab handling instructions. And the save button on the main screen is dithered. And that's because when we click save in little window, it saves what we need to save. We don't have to save again. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for our other row. Click on lab handling instruction, open the drop-down box, select your lab handling instruction, click save, and then that's it. We are done in colrecmate for now. So does anybody have any questions before we close out of this application? All right. So exit that application. And now I am going to go ahead and go through the activity validation with you. And I'm going to introduce you to a really good tool for reviewing your build. And that's Collection Requirements Inquiry. The tool with the longest name in lab, I think. So let's open Collection Requirements Inquiry and sign on in. Now in here, we've got 3 modes: requirements only, requirements and aliquots, or we can even search for orders where no requirements have been defined yet. Probably should be an empty list in your production domain. If not, I've got questions. Now for the activity type for this activity, we're going to go to lab for the activity subtype, chemistry, and click retrieve. We'll click OK on at least one of the service resources is not valid. So that means that we have removed a service resource from being active, but it still has active collection requirements out there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down until you find your order. So here's my vitamin D 25. Now, let's see what we see in here. we can see the specimen types. And the reason why I love collection requirements inquiry, and I love it even better than just going into co-rec-mate, is I can see all of the specimen types associated with an order on the same screen. Because in co-rec-mate, even in Bedrock, you have to look at the sets of specimen or sets of collection requirements one at a time per specimen type. Out here, you don't have to do that. Now, yes, granted, what's on your screen right now, these are chemistry orders. So all of them probably are only going to have one specimen type associated. But you start getting into, for example, micro. If you've got a wound culture in micro, you might have 20 specimen types associated. In here, we can see all of them in one shot, as opposed to looking at them individually. So we see our specimen type, blood. We see the accession class, blood. We see the collection method. Here's our all row. Here's our chemistry manual row. Here's our 0 minutes to 150 years. Here is our container. Now I can scroll over to the right. I can see my special handling instructions and my lab handling instructions. And when we get alternate containers assigned to our orderables, I will even have an icon over here that lets me know alternate containers have been assigned. It won't tell me what they are, but it will tell me that they have been assigned. So I'm going to pause here. Is there anyone who has anything drastically different than what I have on my screen? Is there anyone who's missing your special handling instructions or your lab handling instructions? Okay, excellent. Folks, we will be back in this application. So just know if you close it, we will be coming back in. All right, well, if there are no questions from you, then I'm going to ask you to go ahead and answer the questions on pages 18 and 19 in your participant guide and give me that green check mark when you're done. right, looks like I've got most of those green check marks out there. Thank you very much. Folks, just as a reminder, I do pay attention to those green check marks to let me know when you are ready to go ahead and go over the answers. So please don't forget to give those to me so that we can kind of keep track of our time management. All right, now the first actually couple of questions were going to be really easy to answer as long as you use that advanced search feature in Core Code Builder. So first question, what's the code value for deliver stat? 309533 is correct. So you could have gone about that one of two ways, actually one of three ways. You go into Discern Visual Developer and just do select star from code under value where display under key equals deliver stat, all one word, all capital letters. We haven't covered that, but you could if you remembered fundamentals. You could go into Core Code Builder and you can go deliver stat. That sounds like a special handling instruction. So let me go ahead and pull up code set 230 and kind of visually look in there. But the easiest way to do it, to be quite honest, was click advanced search, use the filter, code value display, type in deliver stat, and then that should take you to code set 230 to code value 309533. Any questions here? All right. Next up, what's the code set for specimen types? 2052, absolutely. And then, folks, name the applications where specimen types are built. I'm kind of combining two into one. Then there's the one that I recommend. So Core Code Builder is one of those places. McDB Tools is the other. And remember, you can build them in Bedrock, but it's got the same problems as building them in Core Code Builder. The microbiology source hierarchy doesn't get updated. So personally, I would prefer McDB Tools in the sources tool. All right, any questions over any of these answers? All right. Then next up, can Core Code Builder be used to build special handling instructions? We didn't, but could it? Yes. Yes, it can. Because you're just adding values onto the code set 230. Bedrock's able to handle it. That's where we built it. You could also go ahead and do it in Core Code Builder, absolutely fine. But can Bedrock be used to add lab handling instructions? No, it cannot. Bedrock doesn't even know that lab handling instructions exist. So the answer to that one is no. And then, what non-lab areas of Millennium use alpha prefixed accession numbers? So what's the other solution that needs to go ahead and sign off on changes made to that code set? Radiology and cardiology. Now remember, AP is part of lab. AP is anatomic pathology. And this was specifically asking what non-lab areas. But yep, radiology and cardiology. Usually the same set of folks, but just have a heads up on that. All right, any questions over any of these answers? All right. Any questions over any part of this chapter? Okay. Then go ahead and clear your green check marks. Let's read over pages 20 and 21, Concepts for Learning Objectives, and then give me that agree when you're done. right, folks, I've got most of those green check marks out there. Thank you very much. And you know, this looks like a good time to go ahead and go on our afternoon break. So, folks, go ahead, get up, stretch, get a cup of coffee, and I will see you back here at the top of the hour. So, enjoy your break, everyone. I will see you back here in a little over 15 minutes, about 17 minutes. Enjoy your break, everyone.
Oh, mine was off. Ready? Are you leaving right now? Okay. 3-minute time. Can you help me with some dark humor? This is purely for entertainment purposes and will only help me in becoming more witty. Help me think of a funny response to a guy who just made this comment on a Reddit post.
All right, folks, welcome back from break. If you can hear me, go ahead and set your status to that green check mark so that I know that you're here. And while we're getting that done, did anybody think of any questions while you were on break? All right, not seeing any questions out there and not hearing any questions. Now, I did have a question come in over private chat that was asking about Core Code Builder and using the advanced search. And folks, just as a reminder, if we use advanced search and we use that code value display to find deliver stat, then it's going to go ahead and return the code set, special handling instructions. In order to see that 309533, we had to open 230 by clicking on the plus sign to the left of it. And that is where we would see 309533. So folks, these are just little things that you will pick up as you continue working with Cerner Millennium. It's just one of those where you're not ever going to pick them all up at the same time. But I will try and give you as many as I can in this class. All right, so we are going to pick up on slide 27, and our slides are broken up into the session setup and the collection parameters. So we're going to start with the accession setup. Now, when it comes to setting up our accession numbers, we have a set of global accession parameters that apply to all solutions that utilize accession numbers. So I think by now we know that that means it's not only us, but it's also radiology and cardiology. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are keeping them in mind. If you are using site prefixes, Defense Health Agency, make sure that you assign the site prefix to the facility, and then we can actually create different accession assignment pools for each of those site prefixes. We can configure accession classes for everyone, and we associate the accession format to the accession class. So all of this is mainly done in the old school accession setup.exe. And folks, I do want to point out that there are a lot of notes that are under slide 29 that you really do want to go ahead and take a look at. So, accession setup global tab. This is where we say how many digits are going to be in the last part of the accession number. Now, in my train domain, we have 4 digits at the end of our accession number. So that is our sequence length. And if we were working with alpha prefixes, we'd probably have 7. Now, folks, let's go ahead and talk about the limits on these different accession formats. Let's talk about the details. The Julian dated accession numbers, that bucket refreshes every day. So in my train domain, every day I can have up to 9,999 accession numbers generated. That I will be able to pull up in accession result entry. But let's say that this was a real domain and we have a really bad day, or we have a really bad set of months. Go ahead and think about like mid-2020. You've got high patient census. You've got a lot of lab tests that are being run on all of those patients. So what happens with that 10,000th accession number of the day? Does it error out? Do you get an error message on the front end? No, I'm sorry, I can't assign the accession number. No, you don't. What happens is that that accession number will still be assigned. However, you won't actually be able to open it in our front end applications until the sequence length is increased from 4 to 5, because there's just not enough spaces for all of the characters. So let's say that we do that. We increase our sequence length from 4 to 5. And so now we can handle 99,999 accession numbers in a day. All right, well, that's better. But you know what? It's been like years since we have had that many accession numbers generated. So somebody is going to have the brilliant idea, well, can we go ahead and reduce that back down to 4? My answer to you is no. Just because you can, the tool will let you, doesn't mean you should. Because if you have used 5 digits or 6 digits and you reduce it back down to 4 digits, you will not be able to open any of those 5 or 6 digit accession numbers. And I don't know a lot about inspections like the JCO auditors coming through and things like that, but I would think that you need to be able to open any accession number in order result viewer or accession result entry or MIC result entry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Stephen's got a question out here. In theory, would a warning be triggered if you're reaching the upper limit of the bucket? So would a warning be triggered if we reach 9,995 in our 4-digit sequence? No. Because these accession numbers, I mean, they can be generated from, GenLab or Micro or Blood Bank or Helix. And so you have, different areas of the lab in this case, because the lab is the one that uses Julian accession numbers. So what would need to happen is that, someone in the lab goes, wow, it's a really high accession number. And then we should probably go ahead and let IT know that they need to increase that sequence length. Now, what does happen is that you're going to get calls, hey, we can't pull up accession number 10,001 from today. because there's only 4 characters at the end. So that's what usually happens. There's no warning. It assigns that accession number with the extra digit, and you'll get a ticket or a call that says, hey, I can't open this in accession result entry, order result viewer, MIC result entry, blood banks result entry application, things like that. So great question, Stephen. It's just not something that we are set up to do. It's something that I bring up in this class because you do need to be aware that it can be an issue. Because the accession number will still be assigned. We just need to make sure that we've got enough digits to be able to open it in our end user applications. Now, folks, like I said, the Julian dated accession numbers, they are refreshed every day. The alpha prefixed accession numbers, though, that bucket is refreshed every year. Now, I want you to go ahead and think about that. Do we think someplace like Northern Health or Kaiser or DHA might have more than 1 million laboratory tests in a given year if they were all pulling from the same pool? What do you think? Absolutely. Because folks, I don't know when the last time you had a blood draw, but I can guarantee I had several orders on my last blood draw. And there's no guarantee that they were all going to be netted to the same accession number. So there's reason number 1 why we say, hey, every area except AP, please go ahead and use the Julian formatted accession numbers. Is because that bucket refreshes every year. And by having Micro and Blood Bank and Helix and GenLab all use the Julian dated accession numbers, then that means we've got fewer calls on the alpha prefixed accession number because it does refresh every year. Now, keep in mind that radiology and cardiology also use the alpha prefixed accession numbers. So if either you or they increase the sequence number from 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, then you cannot turn it back down again, because that's going to mess up either radiology, laboratory, or both. So once the sequence length is increased, it should not be decreased. Now, you'll notice under the Julian dated accessions, we have our sequence length, 4 to 6. We also have the maximum future days entered. And what that is saying is how far in the future are we going to say that we are assuming this is? So let's say if the year, the site prefix and the year are truncated off of the accession number. Well, the system is going to assume current year. But let's say even more if part or all of the Julian formatted accession number, if the site prefix, the year, and the Julian date are truncated off. And all we're left with is that 4 to 6 characters at the end. The system is going to look for orders with that last 4 to 6 digits on their accession number that is current day up to 30 days in advance in this case. Now, luckily, most of the newer analyzers are able to handle longer barcodes, so this isn't as much of a thing as it used to be. So we don't have to truncate quite as much as we used to. So that part is not as big of a deal now. So just set it 30 days and call it. Now below that on the accession assignment, how far in the future can you place an order to be collected and still let it get an accession number? Well, in this case, 1,825 days. So what, that's 5+ years from now? My question is, why are you placing an order now to be collected in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So I would have a question about that. So if you're going, yeah, that would be kind of silly, then you could say, hey, I only want to go maybe a year or a year and a half out. Anything past that, no, we're not going to assign it to a session, even if it doesn't land on a collection list. At the bottom of the Global Settings tab, this is where you determine, are site prefixes going to be used by any solution that utilizes accession numbers? Again, laboratory and radiology. If you're going to be using site prefixes, obviously you can go ahead and set them to yes. How many digits are in your site prefix? 1 digit to 5 digits. And if the patient's encounter takes place at a facility that does not have site prefixes associated, what is the default site prefix going to be? So a lot of sites will have this at, 99 or 999 or 9,099, some absurdly high number to make it really obvious, hey, by the way, the facility associated with this encounter does not have a site prefix associated to it over in the location tool. So I'm going to pause here on the global settings. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the site prefixes is a project that we want to start creating at my hospital.
Okay.
So if you put a default site prefix, we could say like all the outpatient clinics would be 99, and then we have 2 hospital labs, and then we have send-outs and our public health lab because we're county. So can you also assign a default site for Quest and LabCorp?
See, remember, the site prefixes are based on where the patient is registered.
Okay.
So it's not about resource routing. It's where is the encounter taking place.
Okay. So yeah, because when they're registered for phlebotomy, it's registered as a Quest encounter.
Right. So if we go back to slide 14, and we'll get this information, this will go ahead and pop up again. In the location tool, like for model hospital, we assign it a site prefix. So it's whatever the facility is from the patient care hierarchy where that patient encounter takes place.
Okay. I get a picture of that.
Now, you can have multiple facilities with the same accession site prefix. That would kind of defeat the purpose of having a site prefix, unless you just want to say 99 is like all of the outpatient sites. I suppose you could go ahead and do that, but in general, you probably want each of them to have their own site prefix.
Okay. Yeah, we have
Because
about...
with a site prefix, it should be, 93, that is this place. 94, that's that place.
Okay, yeah, we have about, I think, 22 different clinics.
Oh yeah, that's fine then.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be a really easy build out. You have your clinics, you have your hospitals. So we're still talking probably less than 50.
Yeah, okay. Is there a wiki page on this too?
On the site prefixes, they are going to be part of the specimen management set of reference pages. And I can't spell management. There we go. So if you just go out to the wiki and search for specimen management and reference pages, that'll take you to the basic set of reference pages out here. So here's like troubleshooting Oracle Health specimen management. You've got configure specimen management collections. So yes, there are reference pages. There are actually reference pages. If you look in the notes under the slides, a lot of the reference pages will be specifically called out. And if you go to just the straight set of specimen management, set of reference pages, you can do a search out here for site prefix or just the word site and see what comes back in your search. Like maintain Oracle Health Specimen Management accession number modifications.
There we go. Very cool. Thanks.
As an
That'll
example.
help when I present the change request.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's knowing how to go ahead and kind of search around in the wiki. The more practice you get with it, the better off you'll be. This would be the way that I would go ahead and find some things. If I didn't know the reference page right off the top of my head, then I would do exactly what I just did. Get to a page that I know is in specimen management and then go ahead and do the search within that set to see what comes back and then go from there.
Okay.
Now remember though, if you're turning on site prefixes, it needs to be signed off on by all of the stakeholders. So not just laboratory, but also radiology if you are using Cerner's radiology management solution.
Oh, it will. We have a big committee that meets on every change.
Yeah, but it's one of those where, if somebody doesn't make the call, then we can't say, all right, I hear no objections, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, it literally has to be laboratory and radiology both need to sign off on it, and any of their like user representatives, just to go ahead and maybe have some input, because that additional field for the site prefix, there's going to need to be some education in both areas to let people know, hey, by the way, this is coming, so that they know to look for it. Because for some strange reason, folks, our end users don't like surprises.
All right. Thank you.
So, yep, not a problem at all. Folks, I also teach the architecture troubleshooting and issue management class, and you've got a whole chapter in there on change control and how not to just think you're going to be able to sneak something in that affects another solution and hope nobody notices. I've seen bad things happen when people try and do it. All right, folks, any other questions on the global settings tab?
I got one more question.
Yeah, go for it.
So the maximum length of the accession number, it looks like it's let's see, sequence length 6 and 7, so 13.
Nope.
No.
For Julian, it is 6. Whoops, back up. And for Alpha, it's 7. Because the field that it's stored in the back end stores the whole thing unformatted. So, for example, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a notepad file here real quick. All right, so give me an accession number, just like an example accession.
23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's our accession number. So in the back end, it is actually stored site prefix, year, day, sequence. So in this case, this would be stored with 5 zeros, the year formatted to 4 digits, Julian day, and then 0, 0, 0, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's stored as a string that looks like this. Now, if it was an alpha prefix number, so we'll go ahead and say SP23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is again stored with 5 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then SP20, SP2023. And then 0, 0 to have the left-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So notice how we have our 5 digits here, We have our two characters for our alpha response. Like there's the S and the P. Our 4 digits for the year, and then the 7 set of digits at the end, which means I've got too many zeros up top here. There we go. Because this and this have the exact same number of characters. It's just this, the first one is a Julian, and the second one is an alpha.
Okay.
So that's how it's stored in the back end. So we're not adding this sequence length to that sequence length. All that is determining is what is our last set of numbers. And do we need to pad the left-hand side with any extra zeros? Does that help clarify?
Yes, that was, thank you.
And we actually will go through that as an activity in CCL on Thursday morning.
Okay.
So this will come back again. All right, folks, what other questions do you have? All right. So once the global settings are made, then we can go over and we can create our accession classes. Now notice, when we create an accession class, we assign it an accession format. Okay, so every accession class gets an accession format. And you'll notice that, while we'll have accession classes that will match most of the major specimen types, we're obviously not going to create a matching accession class for every single one of our specimen types. Just kind of the major ones, because we want bloods to net with bloods, urines to net with urines. We do not want bloods and urines on the same accession, just as a Cerner recommended best practice. Now, something to be aware of, both radiology and microbiology recommend that their orders each get their own accession number. So for radiology and microbiology, a new accession class is created for every orderable and specimen type combination, so that no micro order nets with any other micro order upon initially being ordered, which means this is going to be a pretty big list. Now, for the folks who took the micro class last week, you might remember that when it comes to creating accession classes, you have a unique option. You can allow Bedrock to create that for you. And when we created that accession class in Bedrock, the Julian date format was automatically assigned. Now, if we're not creating a micro, we can still use the add collection parameters to go ahead and build an accession class. That's fine. And again, it will be automatically assigned the Julian dated format. Because, again, for everybody who's not anatomic pathology, we recommend the Julian dated format. So if you wanted to, you could create an accession class out here. And then I suppose you could go back to the accession setup tool and change the accession format that's assigned. Now, thankfully, we're not creating new accession classes every day. So this is usually a set it and forget it scenario. Unless you're micro, unless you're radiology, in which case you're creating unique accession classes for each of your orders. So does anybody have any questions about accession classes, accession formats, the relationship? All right. So now let's go ahead and bring those accession assignment pools back into play. Because part of the point of having these accession site prefixes is that we can create different accession assignment pools for them to go ahead and pull their accession numbers out of. So we could have one pool for our model experience hospital, and we could have a different pool for our baseline hospitals. So that means that when we are assigning the accession numbers with the site prefix, if model has a site prefix of 33, we could have a 33 and then 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And maybe we could have a 35, 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because those different site prefixes, we can have pulled from different pools. So this is how our larger clients don't run out of accession numbers at the end of the day, because they create these different pools for them to pull from. And we can have multiple site prefixes pull from the same pool. So Christian, for example, you could have an outpatient pool and then just assign each of the site prefixes for your output destinations. You could have all of those grouped to where they're pulling from your outpatient pool, and then you could have another pool for one hospital's inpatients and a third pool for the other hospital's inpatients. You could totally do that. So again, each site gets its own site prefix, but multiple sites can share the same pool. So Christian, does that make sense?
That's a little more advanced.
Well, as you go ahead and read up on the reference pages on it, it will go ahead and talk about it. I am just letting you know that the accession assignment pools tab is where you would do it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll definitely read up on it. Thank you.
And folks, this is also where you can say, hey, this is going to be an alpha prefixed accession pool. So this is where we go ahead and set what pool do these accessions pull from. Now, I'm going to show you a bit of esoteric information. So you will probably never need to know this. I just thought it was kind of cool, so I'm including it. If you are on the accession assignment pools tab and you go up to view and buckets, whatever pool you have open, it will show you what the next accession number is that's going to be assigned. So current year, current day, the next accession number, it is in the next sequence column. And let's say you needed to skip some accession numbers, you could actually put a new sequence in here. So maybe we need to skip from 2 to 200 because something happened. We could do that in this view. Now, in all of my years at Cerner, I have only encountered that one time. But yeah, it's a nice piece of information here. So folks, we're going to wrap up this part by talking about accession netting. How do orders get the same accession number? Well, with accession netting, there's only 4 parameters involved. The orders have to have the same accession class. And, well, as you saw, if they have the same accession class, they're going to have the same accession format, no problem. The orders must also have the same requested start date and time. So for us, that means they need to have the same collection date and time. And they have to have the same conversation ID with the netting server. Now, folks, same accession class, same accession format, we've got control over that over on our side. Okay, that is part of the database build. The user will have control over making sure they have the same requested start date and time, the same collection date and time. Same conversation ID with the netting server, that actually gets kind of tricky. Because what that is saying is that the orders must be in the same data packet that we send to the netting server so that they can have the same conversation ID on the netting table. Now, if you are in department order entry, you're placing 5 orders, they all have the same accession class, they all have the same accession format, they've all got the same requested start date and time, there's a pretty good chance that they are going to have the same conversation ID on the netting table. Pretty good chance that all 5 orders will be in the same data packet that we send to the netting server. However, let's say that you, or your end user, I should say, is in PowerChart, and they are activating a 50 order power plan. Do we think that there is a guarantee in that 50 order power plan that has orders for laboratory and radiology and patient care and pharmacy and all of that, that we are guaranteed to get our lab orders in the same data packet we're sending to the netting server? What do you think? We're activating a 50 order power plan over in PowerChart. Yeah, Steven, you're right. No, there is no guarantee. So folks, we see this with power plans. We see this with a bunch of orders when they cross an orders interface. So you will get a ticket that says, hey, this should have netted to the same accession number, and it didn't. Well, from the activity that we did this morning, we know that as long as they're not all placed as collected, then we can use collections resolution to kind of merge those orders into the same accession number, into the same container. So that is a way that we can go ahead and resolve that. But the reason why it's sporadic is that it really does depend on how the order is placed. Are we submitting 5 orders at one time, or are we submitting 50 orders at one time? So if it came in with a whole bunch of other orders, then yeah, you're probably going to run into those orders being sent in different data packets from the order write synchronous server or order write synchronous for FSI to the lab share, and from the lab share to the netting server. So folks, this just kind of circles back to, you really need to be comfortable with CCL, because that last one, you're not going to find it on the front end. The only place to find that information is on netting table in the back end. So does anybody have any questions on accession netting? There's 4 parameters.
I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm not good with CCL. Is there a page I can read to brush up on it?
We will actually have a CCL activity on Thursday morning, so we'll go ahead and we'll include that as part of this class.
Okay.
I will also say that there is actually a really good self-paced learning called the Cerner Millennium Discern Explorer 1 WBT that I recommend everyone take. So Cerner Discern Explorer 1 or Cerner Millennium Discern Explorer 1, they're both web-based. It's going to be a web-based training. And I really need to reinforce with everyone that, again, troubleshooting lab is never just troubleshooting lab. So you really want to go ahead and take that particular web-based training. So I will tell you, Christian, I've taken it 4 times in the time that I've been at Cerner, and I've learned something new every time.
All right, good.
So go ahead.
I said, all right, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no. And it's one of those things where when I took it all 4 times, it hadn't changed. I was just ready to utilize different pieces of information. Now, folks, I will say for anybody in here who has taken it previously, it actually recently went through an uplift. So you might want to take it again just as a refresher. All right. So folks, that's accession netting. Accession netting's not too bad. Collections. This is where things start to get interesting. Because this is where we're going to go ahead and build out our collection priorities along with those default settings. Build out collection classes. Build out specimen containers and collection requirements. There's a whole lot of moving parts and pieces in here. And we're going to start with collection priorities. So remember in our activity this morning where we selected the timed study collection priority and the timed study reporting priority defaulted in force. That's because of the build that was done in the collection priorities application. So when we come in here, we do not build collection priorities directly in their code set because there are a lot of settings that obviously won't get set in that case. So we come out here to collection priorities. We give it a 2-character display. We give it a description, and then how is it going to behave? So immediate print always. Remember, whenever we're talking about printing, what we are referring to is generating the accession number. So is this collection priority always going to immediately get its accession number? The answer is yes. We check the box for immediate print always. So in this case, that's our stat. Now, before first and after last, we'll actually get to those tomorrow when we talk about our scheduled collections. So I'm going to hold off on explaining those. Now, the group flag. Ooh, this has to deal with look-aheads. So there's a setting in the back end that we will go over in the troubleshooting chapter. We're actually a little earlier than that, where we say how far ahead should an immediate accessioned order look to invite other orders to join it. And so we set a time frame. So it might be 60 minutes, it might be 120 minutes, it might be more than that. But then when it looks ahead, it is going to look at the group flag, not only of the order that is getting its accession number right away, but also the orders that are scheduled for that patient. Now, a group flag of N is no. I am not going to join you. You are not going to join me. So just think of it as our misanthrope, all right? It is antisocial. So for the add-on collection priority orders, if they immediately get an accession number, which they're an accession add-on, so they probably should, they're not going to pull any orders in with them. And if somehow an add-on order was actually added to a collection list, it's not going to leave that collection list early to join anybody else's order or to join any other order. So it is the way it is. I'm not going to join you. You're not going to join me. Now, the group flag of Y, these are our extroverts, all right? I will invite you to join me. I will leave my collection list and I will join you. No problem. All right, so our AM draw, our routine, our stat, those are our extroverts. They'll join anybody. But the last one here, our timed study, it has a group flag of G. So time study is our D, okay? Time study says you may join me, but I am not going to change my plans to join you. And my clinical folks know why. For my non-clinical folks, timed study orders need to be collected at specific times. Otherwise, the results will not be accurate. So as an example, I'm going to give you a glucose tolerance test. So for a glucose tolerance test, we have a glucose blood draw that happens immediately. And then after the glucose is administered, then there's a blood draw maybe at 30 minutes after, and then again at 60 minutes after, and then maybe at 2 hours after, and at 3 hours after. So those blood draws must happen at 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours. They cannot be collected early. Otherwise, it's going to throw off our test results. So if there is a time study order that immediately generates its accession number, then it will say, okay, hey, you routine order, you can join me. You AM draw order, you can join me. But if the time study order is on the collection list and routine says, hey, anybody want to go ahead and join me on my accession number, time study is going to go, nope, that would be way too early. So to recap, a group flag of N, this is our introvert, this is our misanthrope. I'm not going to join you, you are not going to join me. Group flag of Y, that's our extrovert. You can join me, I can join you, it's all good. Group flag of G, again, this is the recommended group flag for our time study, says you may join me, but I am not going to change my plans to join you. Just if you have any questions on the group flag.
Sorry, it's me again. What was the label sequence?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, sorry. Got it.
We haven't gotten there yet, but folks, I am going to remind you that if you open up the slides and you scroll on through the slides, check out the notes that are under the slides so that you can see that information. Because on these, here's the accession assignment pools, here's our collections, here's our priorities. Your question on the add-on column is on the bottom of page 37, top of page 38 in your PowerPoint PDF. Folks, this is why I really highly recommended that everyone have their PDFs open in Adobe so that you could see all of the notes that are under the slides. So next up, we've got time study. Now, folks, time study, remember, very important to go ahead and be collected at exactly at that time, not late. But different sites will call time studies different labels. So we can't go on the label and say, oh yeah, that's a time study. So what we have is a checkbox that says, I don't care what you call it. If you want me to treat it like a time study, you have to have the checkbox selected. Now, to answer the question about label sequence, when there's a whole batch of labels that are being generated, maybe because there is a collection list that is being accessioned, then in what sequence do you want the labels to come out of the label control? And so the lower the sequence number, the lower the label sequence number, the more towards the beginning of that list they're going to print. So any orders that have a stat collection are going to print first. Any orders that have a time to study collection will print after that. Any orders with a routine collection priority will print after the time study orders. So if you have a collection route that accepts multiple collection priorities, then the labels will be generated, the accession numbers will be assigned, based on our label sequence up. Okay, and again, remember, read those notes under the slide because they're going to have more detailed information. Now, the add-on column here, this is actually new-ish. This was just added in the last few years. And here is where I am definitely going to say, look at this in Adobe. Okay, look at this in Adobe because you want to go ahead and look at the notes that are under slide 37. Because as we look down in these notes, okay, we have our add-on column here. And there's some functionality involved here that we didn't used to have before. Because the way that it used to be was that the physician would place an order with an add-on collection priority. The lab would try to use the accession add-on mode of accession result entry to go ahead and add that order onto an accession number. And then they would go back and they would cancel the order that was actually placed by the physician if they were able to successfully place a new add-on order on an accession number in the accession add-on mode in department order entry. Now, with this add-on priority, we don't have that problem anymore. Because when a physician places a laboratory order with an add-on collection priority, the laboratory staff takes the necessary steps to merge the order into an already collected container using collections resolution. And if they don't have a valid specimen, the lab can modify the collection priority of the order. They can set the nurse collect detail to yes. They can update the collection date and time of the order. So we can just add that order onto a future collection list instead of doing a cancel and reorder. This is huge, folks. So again, I'm going to say you have the add-on column out here. Here's your label sequence column. Make sure that you are reviewing the information that's under the slides. A lot of good info out there. So we have our default reporting priority. We already saw that this morning. And then we've got our default start date and time. Now we've already said T and N, that's today and now. But let's look at that AM draw collection priority here. So if an order is placed now with an AM draw collection priority, what is the default start time going to be? What's the default start date and time going to be for an order placed now with an AM draw priority? Tomorrow at 3:30 a.m. So T plus 1, all right, so that's tomorrow. And then at 03:30. So you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now, what about an order that is placed at 1 a.m. with an AM draw collection priority? So 1 a.m. this morning. Well, let's make it easier. 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. So Tuesday morning, 1 a.m., AM draw collection priority. What is the default start time going to be? Nope. It'll be Wednesday morning at 3:30. For that time period between midnight and the cutoff or whatever the list is that generates at 3:30, you've got a situation where if the users use the AM draw, then it is going to default in the start date and time more than 24 hours from that point. Exactly, Krista, because it's the T plus 1. So if it was this morning at 03:30, then it would be, or this morning at 1 was the order time, it would be tomorrow at 03:30. That would be the default start time. If it's tomorrow morning at 1 a.m., then it would be Wednesday morning at 03:30. Therein lies the rub. Therein lies the need for end user education, which will work about 98% of the time, but you're always going to have at least 1 or 2 users that will consistently choose the wrong collection priority. And then they're going to be confused on why they didn't get their results after the morning rounds of specimen collections. Now, thankfully, most order entry formats will have the default, the collection date and time as editable. So as long as the user double checks, which they should be doing, and they go, whoops, I don't want that for Wednesday morning, let me go ahead and set that for Tuesday morning, then you'll be fine. But not every user is going to catch that all the time. So some sites use the AM drop, some sites don't. It may just depend on your site as far as whether you have that kind of situation or not. Questions here? All right. Now, we can create our collection priorities out here. We should create our collection priorities out here, because this is what it looks like over in Bedrock. Folks, what's missing from this picture? If we use the add collection parameters in Bedrock to create a new collection class, what fields are we missing? And I'll tell you, there are a few, like 7. Folks, compare slide 37 and 38. Which fields are missing from slide 38? Group flag is missing. Absolutely. What else? Let's go ahead and have at least 2 more people chime in. You've got 7 fields that are missing. Okay, after last is missing, before first is missing. All right, folks, don't let Krista have all the fun now. Label sequencing, default start time, absolutely. So immediate print always, before first, after last, group flag, time study, add-on, label sequence, those are all missing. So if you build a collection priority in Bedrock, it basically will function like a routine. And I am willing to bet my next dessert, you already have a routine. So this is one of those cases where just because you can add it in Bedrock, I don't recommend it, because of all of the different parameters that aren't set when you build it in Bedrock. So any questions here? All right. Now, let's talk about collection classes. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you right now, I want you to think of collection classes like an octopus. The collection classes have their arms all throughout the specimen management workflow. So you're going to be going, wait, why is that doing that? Oh, it's the collection class. Hey, wait a minute, why is this? Oh, it's the collection class. So building the collection classes correctly is incredibly important. And I know the font on here is tiny, So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to blow it up a bit, make it a little bit easier to see. All right. So let's go and take our send outs, for example. So we've got a send out frozen, send out refrigerated, and send out room temperature. Now, as we scroll to the right, we've got various fields. If I scroll up, the first one is the sequence. That field is not used. But the next one is max class volume and max accession size. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Max class volume. This is the way that you can limit the number of specimen labels that are printed when you've got a whole bunch of tests that are netted to the same container. So what this is saying, with a max class volume of 10, we're going to print the labels for 10 milliliters of specimen for chemistry, or for, in this case, send out frozen or send out refrigerated or send out room temperature. Then we're not going to print anymore, because a lot of the minimum volumes for our tests aren't the actual minimum volumes. They are going in and they're just giving an approximation. Okay? So this is a way that you can say, hey, you know what? After 10 mil of a send out room temperature, don't print any more labels for these orders that have netted into the same set of containers. Now, max accession size, how many characters do you want in your barcode? Now, we've got ours set to 12. So let's go ahead and count it out. So for our accession number this morning, we had 2 characters for the year, 3 characters for the Julian day. All right, we're up to 5. We had 4 characters for our accession number of the day. So now we're up to 9. And we had our container ID, which would be in our barcode. So now we're at 10 characters. 10 characters is less than 12. We're good. If we decide to increase our sequence from 4 to 5 or 5 to 6, we're still good. Because with a sequence of 6, we'll have 5 characters for the year of the day, 6 characters for the sequence, we're up to 11, and then 1 character for the accession, or the container ID. But that only works if we're not using site IDs, or site prefixes. You add site prefixes into the mix, and we have a max accession size of 12. Well, then we start getting truncation happening. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean here. So we have a site prefix. Does DHA, do you use all 5 digits on your site prefix? Since I know I've got DHA folks in here, do you use all 5 digits on your site prefix? Four. Okay. So you've got a site prefix that's 4 digits. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 23, 317 for today, and then 0, 0, 0, and 6. So like this would be my accession number for today if I had a site prefix over there at DHA. Now, when it is stored in the back end, it's stored as R0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 0, 2, 3, 3, 1, 7, and then 0, 0, 2, 3, and 6. So that's the way it looks in the back end. With our max accession class of 12, then here's what we need to know. So is the container ID in the barcode? Well, if I scroll over here to the right, so 3rd row up from the bottom, it's not printed. Okay, so we're not going to include the container ID in the label or in that barcode at all. It's not going to be in the label, it's not going to be in the barcode. So we don't have to worry about that. So what that means is that we have to get this number to 12 characters. And right now, 4, 6, 9, right now it's got 13, assuming I'm counting correctly. So what would happen is we would truncate off the 1. And we would have 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 3, 1, 7, 0, 0, 0, 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 12 characters. So with that max accession size of 12 characters, we would wind up truncating off the 1. Now, what would happen is that this is what the barcode would have. 2, 3, 4, and then 2, 3, 3, 1, 7, 0, 0, 0, 6. So then when that was scanned, when the label was scanned, maybe going into accession result entry or specimen login, if there was another accession that had the 2, 3, 4, the 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 7, 0, 0, 6, you would actually have a pop-up window where you would have to select, hey, which one of these are you logging in? Which one of these are you opening in the accession result entry application or in MIC result entry? Because that left-hand side would have been truncated off. So that max accession size, how many characters are in the barcode? Now, if we had the container ID in the barcode, so we had an A at the end, we would actually truncate off both the 1 and the 2 to again get to 12 characters. So this is why you might have truncated accession numbers and need those settings over in the global settings tab in accession setup. Now again, thankfully, most of our modern analyzers are not limited to 12 characters, but it is something to be aware of here, especially if your site is setting up site prefixes. You may need, Christian, to go out and increase the max accession size for your collection classes in order to accommodate those extra digits. Now, our next set of numbers is our default storage. So remember, in storage, we can actually run reports for specimens that qualify for discard. This is where we set how long they can be in storage from the time that the specimen was collected, I believe, to when they qualify for discard. So is it a few hours? Is it 1 day? Is it 2 days? Is it 10 years, like our genetics tests? How long can this be in storage? Now the next column on here, what kind of barcode are we going to create? Code 128, code 39, with check digit, without check digit. What is that barcode going to look like? We continue to scroll over. How's it going to be adjusted? So 0 and left, it's going to be adjusted to the upper left-hand corner. So our container ID print, notice that I checked this column so that I would know whether the container ID, that A, B, C, or D, was going to be in my 12 characters. And in this column, we've got 3 possible values. We have not printed, we have barcode and label, so the container ID will be in the human readable label and in the barcode, or just the label. Now see, this is going to come into play later on. because in specimen login, we can require that the users log in using that container ID. So if you're going to require that the users log in specifically container A, container B, container C of an accession number, then you've got to have the container ID at least on the human readable label, ideally in both the barcode and the label. If you can't do that, then you really can't require that the users use that container ID in specimen login. So like I said, octopus. Now, transfer temperature, this is where we set from our, I think it's 2062. This is where we set that frozen refrigerated room temperature. So when we're going into transfer specimens and we're creating a frozen transfer list, only the containers that are currently in the location associated with the from tracking location, that have the in-lab location associated with the to tracking location, and have the frozen collection class on the orders in that container will qualify for a frozen transfer list. So if you're sitting there going, whoa, there's way too much going on in there, you lost me. Oh, don't worry, I will be reminding you of this again as we go through. The big thing that I want you to know, the big thing I want you to go ahead and remember is remember all of these settings in here and then look in Bedrock. Just know. Because in Bedrock, you go in and define the collection class. We're missing all of those settings. We're missing the max class volume, the max accession size. We are, oh, absolutely. There it is. So with Bedrock up here, in fact, I can go ahead and shift this off to the side so that we've got a better angle here. So in Bedrock, when you build a collection class, you don't have the max class volume, you don't have the max accession size, you don't have the default storage date and time, you don't have the barcode format, again, code 128, code 39 with check digit, code 39 without check digit, you don't have that at all. So until they get all of those settings into Bedrock, I wouldn't build a collection class out here because you're just going to have to go back to the collection classes tool anyway. Just set up. So any questions on collection classes? Again, they will come back into play later on. All right. Now, remember this other tool I was talking about, though, that associate benches and instruments to collection classes? Oh, yeah, this one I like. Because what this one says is that if your order routes to the Chem Auto subsection, Chemistry Manual Bench, VTROS 1, VTROS 2, whatever, we're going to default in the Chemistry Collection class. So, folks, that right there will save clicks, which saves time when you're doing your build, and it also gives a more consistent build. So unless there is a reason to change away from the chemistry collection class, we can just leave it in there. And then it's going to function like a chemistry. So I'm a big fan of this one, especially for those larger sites. Now, I will say, go ahead and back up here, I will say one thing. Because we can default in the collection classes for routed service resources, and because the collection class prints on the specimen label, there are sites that have created facility-specific collection classes. So for example, I would have a model experience chemistry, MX Chem, or a baseline West chemistry, BW chem. And then what that does is for the Vitros 1 and the Vitros 2 and the Chem Auto subsection multiplexer at the model experience lab, then those will be associated with the MX chemistry. For the ones that are over in baseline West, those would be associated with BW chemistry. And then right there on the specimen label, it says the routing. Hey, this is going to, baseline West chemistry. This is going to model experiences chemistry. So some sites have done that, and they find it to be useful. I am not saying that you all should do it. I'm just saying it's an option. So these are our collection classes and how to associate them with service resources. Any questions on collection classes? All right. So then let's talk about specimen containers. So folks, we can build specimen containers in specimencontainers.exe, or we can build them in Bedrock. Either way works. When you are building a container, you give it a display, you give it a description, you give it volume units. This could be an each, like our filter paper up here, or it can be in milliliters. There are all kinds of different volume units. And we mark whether it is an aliquot or not. So for my non-clinical folks, aliquots are where we pour off a little bit of the specimen into a separate container, because maybe we're running most of the specimen in the lab, but part of it's going to be a send out to a reference lab. So that's an aliquot. Now, the reason why we check that it is an aliquot is because when we go to build our collection requirements, non-aliquot containers will show up in one place, aliquot containers will show up in another place. So an aliquot container cannot be a parent container and vice versa. And then whatever sizes that container comes in, we add into the volumes. So either to the right here in specimencontainers.exe, or we can simply keep adding container size volume fields using our add button over here in Bedrock. Now, just as a heads up, when you come in to the add collection parameters and you are adding in a new container, it defaults to aliquot container no, and you don't even see that question. So you have to drag the window open just a little bit to be able to see that last question. Because most of the time you're not building aliquots. So I guess that's the reason that the engineers decided to go ahead and code it that way. So any questions on our containers? All right. So then let's go ahead and talk about building collection requirements. So if you come in here and you have a brand new order, you pull up the sub-activity type, you pull up the orderable item, but until you select a specimen type, the collection requirements rows are not populated. Once you select the specimen type, then those rows are populated. You'll be able to double check your routing on that new order. If you see an unexpected service resource in here, stop, go back and fix your routing. If you do not see a service resource that's supposed to be in here and you know you selected the facility that it should be in and it's still not here, go back and check your routing. Now, we'll then associate an accession class. Capillary would probably have a blood accession class, associated collection method. And then because Chem Auto subsection, Vitros 1 and Vitros 2 were defaulted to chemistry, chemistry's already been filled in for us on the top part. But on our safety net row down here, we've said, you know what? I want this collection class to be call lab. Because if you see call lab right there on the specimen label, you know there's a routing problem or there's something wrong with the collection requirements, because we were not able to match based on the routed service resource, patient age, collection priority combination. Now, I will say, if I am building a set of bog standard chemistry orders that have the exact same collection requirements as an order that I already have in the system, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use this copy button here in the lower left-hand side. Because when you use that copy button, you can pull up an order where the collection requirements are exactly what you need, and then you can copy it out to one or more other orderables as long as they have the same activity subtype and the same routing. You'll be able to copy the collection requirements. So I am a big fan of this because this lets me copy the build that I already know works out to my new orders, and I could set up the routing for a dozen orders all in one shot by simply moving them, clicking on copy, moving them from the left to the right, clicking OK, bam. All of them have their collection requirements now. You'd be afraid to copy something wrong. You know what? That's where you just double check. You double check your DCW and you go, okay, yep, this looks like a bog standard chemistry order. You pull up a bog standard chemistry order, and as long as it matches what's on your DCW for your new orders, feel free to copy away. Now, folks, I want to point out, especially for my folks from last week from Micro, this copy button behaves differently than the one in Micro. Remember, the one in Micro copies the same collection requirements from one specimen type to multiple other specimen types for the same order. But over here in GenLab, it is all the collection requirements from one order to one or more other orders. And Krista, I will say I'm a big fan of the copy functions in Bedrock. Copy work routing, copy reference ranges, big fan of those, as well as copying the collection requirements. So now let's go ahead and talk about some other parameters, such as alternate containers. You actually heard me mention this earlier, but I didn't go too deep into it. So for some orders, let's say we normally collect them in a red top tube. What happens if we run out of red top tubes? Do we just not collect the orders? Well, for some of our orders, we can say, hey, you know what? A serum separator tube is close enough. That can be an alternate container. So when that container gets logged in, the user should go, hey, that's not a red top, that's an SST. And then right there in specimen login, the accessioning desk person can go ahead and switch it to the alternate container so that our documentation is correct. We collected a 3 mil SST for this acetone order, this acetone level order. We didn't collect a red top, we collected an SST. Now, is this something you have to do for every single laboratory in the database? No. But maybe for some of the ones that are the most common to need to get alternate containers on, maybe the ones where you know you had supply chain issues, and you're like, just in case, let's go ahead and set up an alternate container. You can go ahead and do that in Bedrock by clicking on the Define Alternate Containers button. And then when it pulls up, it'll pull in the minimum volume, the collection class, the special handling. You'll select a viable alternate container, and then you can apply that to any or all of the service resources. Now, you can also define alternate containers in ColRecMate. Again, this is our old school tool. And again, you click on the ellipsis button. You'll have to manually put in the minimum volume, the container, the collection class, the special handling. And again, when you click save, it saves. You don't have to click save again on the main screen. So these are the alternate containers. These are not the aliquots, though. Aliquot containers can only be associated in colorecnate. So Bedrock has a little checkbox that says, yeah, it has alternate aliquot containers on it, but you can't actually do the association of them. So you've got to do that over in colorecmate. Collection requirements maintenance.exe. Now, there is technically an old school copying correct copy application. This one, you can go ahead and append to existing requirements or replace existing requirements. With the advent of Bedrock, I don't see this used very much anymore, but it is an option. And then, folks, I just want to go ahead and remind you that collection requirements inquiry is a great tool for reviewing your build, because Bedrock does have a couple of reports out there, but the reports are actually split into collections with aliquot details and collections with alternate container details, but you don't get both. At least with collection requirements inquiry, it'll give you an icon that will let you know if alternate containers have been assigned. But you can see requirements, you can see the aliquots, you can see everything that you need just about in collection requirements inquiry. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about before we wrap up for the day is label netting. So folks, there were 4 parameters involved in getting orders onto the same accession number. There are 15 parameters involved in getting orders into the same container. Now again, some of these we've got control over as database builders. So same accession class, same collection class, same special handling instructions. The printer has the same label, file, prefix. But some of this is out of our control. Same accession number, that's out of our control. Same specimen container type. That should be something that we have control over. Same collection method, that is a changeable field. That can be changed in order entry, that can be changed in specimen login. Same collected yes/no indicator. So if a user places one order as collected no and the other order is collected yes, they're not going to land in the same container. So for micro, orders with different body sites, different containers. Different collection date and times. Well, if it's got a different collection date and time, it's definitely going to have different accession numbers. So the user has to pay careful attention to the collection date and time, the collection ID, the specimen receipt location, the label printer, the label print yes/no. So some of these fields we have control over, some of the fields the end user has control over. But all 15 must line up for orders to net to the same container. So folks, what questions do you have? All right, Sherry, your hand is raised. Go ahead. What's your question?
Just for the aliquot, do you have to have that checked off and then you go into maintain collections? I think you said.
In order for it to qualify for the aliquot build, the container itself must be marked as an aliquot. Then and only then will it show up in the container drop-down box in the aliquot requirements box. If it's not marked as an aliquot in the container build, it will not show up in this list.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. All right, any other questions out there? Okay, so folks, this is the end of the day. We are going to start tomorrow morning with our activity on page 21. So you probably want to go ahead and be already logged into the train domain before class. Now, with the last couple of minutes here, folks, those of you that have had me for class before, you might remember I am in the Zoom room at least 30 minutes prior to class. If you have any questions, go ahead and pop into class early. I'm more than happy to go ahead and go over them with you. In the morning, we are going to have what's called a roll call review. And that is where I will call your name and I will say good morning, and then you will tell me something that you remember from the previous day. But there's a catch. Once someone mentions a particular topic, it is off limits for everyone else. So in this last minute or so, you may want to go ahead and write down 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you remember while it's still fresh in your head, so that as your fellow classmates steal your ideas, hopefully you still have 1 or 2 left by the time we reach your area of the list. Now, Stephen, you will not be going first tomorrow, but that is not to say you won't be going first either Wednesday morning or Thursday morning, because I moved that around in the list on who gets to start first and who has to go last. So, folks, with that, I'm just going to pause and check and see, does anybody have any questions before we call it a day? All right. Folks, go enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everyone.